Lián Suǒ is a character from the ghost story in Pu Songling's collection of short stories Strange Stories from a Chinese Studio. This story tells of the romantic relationship between a scholar named Yáng Yúwèi and a female ghost named Lián Suǒ. Yáng Yúwèi moved to live by the banks of the Sea River. His study was near the wilderness, and there were many ancient tombs outside the walls. Every night, the poplar trees in the graveyard rustled loudly in the wind, sounding like the surging waves of the sea. One night, while Yáng Yúwèi was alone by the lamp, feeling desolate, he suddenly heard someone outside the wall reciting a poem. In the deep night, the bleak wind blows back. Fireflies provoke grass, and dew soaks the curtains. The verses were repeated several times, the voice full of sorrow and misery. Upon closer listening, it sounded soft and melodious, like that of a woman. Yáng Yúwèi grew suspicious. The next morning, he went outside to investigate, but there was no trace of anyone, only a purple ribbon left abandoned among the thorns. He picked it up and placed it on the windowsill. When night came again, in the middle of the second watch, the recitation of the poem started again, just like the previous night. Yáng Yúwèi quietly moved a stool to the wall and stood on it to peer outside. The recitation immediately ceased. Yáng Yúwèi realized that it was a female ghost, but he admired her nonetheless. The following night, he hid on the wall waiting. As the first watch was coming to an end, a young woman emerged from the weeds. Holding a small tree and reciting the same lines of the poem, her head lowered in sorrow. Yáng Yúwèi softly cleared his throat, and the woman suddenly disappeared into the weeds. Yáng Yúwèi continued the lines from the poem across the wall: hidden affections, bitter thoughts, who will know? Green sleeves, cold and alone, under the rising moon. After a long while, silence fell outside the wall. Yáng Yúwèi returned to his study and had just sat down when he saw a beautiful woman entering from outside. She bowed to him and said, "You are a refined gentleman. I was overly afraid and avoided you." Yáng Yúwèi was overjoyed and invited her to sit. The woman was thin and weak, as if she couldn't even bear the weight of her clothes. Yáng Yúwèi asked, "Where is your hometown? How have you lived here for so long?" The woman replied, "I am from Longxi, and I came here to live with my father. I fell seriously ill and died when I was 17. It's been more than 20 years now. I've been living underground in the wilderness, feeling very lonely. I composed those verses myself to express my hidden resentment. I pondered for a long time, but couldn't think of the next lines. Thank you for continuing them for me. Even beneath the earth, I feel joyful." Yáng Yúwèi wanted to establish a closer connection with her. But the woman frowned and said, "Ghosts from the netherworld, unlike living beings. If we engage in emotional intimacy, it shortens human lifespans. I cannot bring harm to a virtuous person." Yáng Yúwèi had no choice but to give up, yet he still touched the woman's chest and found her to be untouched. He also wanted to see her feet beneath her skirt. The woman laughed and said, "You're quite persistent." Yáng Yúwèi touched her feet and noticed that there was a colored thread tied to her jade-white silk stockings. He saw that the other foot had a purple ribbon tied to it, and asked, "Why not use ribbons for both feet?" The woman replied, "Last night, I got scared and ran away from you, forgetting where I dropped the purple ribbon." Yáng Yúwèi said, "Let me tie it for you." He went to the windowsill and retrieved the purple ribbon, handing it to the woman. She was surprised and asked where he got it. Yáng Yúwèi truthfully explained. The woman untied the colored thread and used the ribbon to tie her stockings. After she finished, she looked at the books on the table and saw a CI poem written by Yuanzhen titled Lian Chang Palace. She sighed and said, "When I was alive, I loved reading these poems the most. Now seeing them again, it feels like a dream." Yáng Yúwèi and her discussed poetry and literature, finding her to be intelligent and knowledgeable, making her even more likable. They spent nights together beneath the lamp, playing and reading, as if they had found kindred spirits in each other. From then on, whenever Yáng Yúwèi recited poetry in a low voice, the woman would appear shortly after. She repeatedly warned him, "You must keep our interactions a secret, not revealing anything. I have been timid since childhood, and I'm afraid of being taken advantage of by malicious individuals." Yáng Yúwèi promised. The two of them grew very close, even though they had not shared a bed. Their feelings for each other exceeded those of a typical couple. The woman often copied books for Yáng Yúwèi by the lamp, her handwriting elegant and graceful. She also selected 100 palace-style poems, transcribing and reciting them. She even had Yáng Yúwèi prepare a chess set and bought a pipa, teaching him to play chess every night. Sometimes she played the pipa herself, performing the melody of Raining on the Banana Window, evoking a sense of melancholy. Yáng Yúwèi couldn't bear to listen to it, so she played Morning Garden Warbler's song instead, bringing a refreshing feeling. They enjoyed each other's company beneath the lamp, often forgetting about the approaching dawn. Only when they noticed the light outside the window did the woman hurriedly depart. One day, Zhu came to visit. Coincidentally, he found Yáng Yúwèi sleeping during the day. Upon seeing the pipa and chess set in the room, he realized these were not Yáng Yúwèi's strengths. He also discovered some transcribed palace-style poems with elegant handwriting and began to grow suspicious. When Yáng Yúwèi woke up, Zhu inquired about the gaming materials, to which Yáng Yúwèi replied that he wanted to learn. Zhu asked about the poem scroll, and Yáng Yúwèi falsely claimed he had borrowed it from a friend. Zhu carefully examined the materials and discovered the last line of the poem had a small note written on it. On a certain month and day, Lián Suǒ transcribed this book. Zhu laughed and said, "This is a girl's nickname. Why are you deceiving me like this?" Yáng Yúwèi felt awkward and didn't know how to respond. Zhu rolled up the poem scroll, as if intending to take it away as leverage. Yáng Yúwèi felt even more embarrassed and finally told the truth. Zhu insisted on meeting the woman, and Yáng Yúwèi conveyed the message, but the woman grew angry, exclaiming, "What did I tell you? Yet you incessantly shared it with others." Yáng Yúwèi explained the situation at the time. And the woman said, "Our fate has come to an end." Despite Yáng Yúwèi's efforts to console and explain, the woman remained unhappy, saying goodbye and adding, "I will hide for the time being." The next day, Zhu returned, and Yáng Yúwèi informed him that the woman didn't want to meet. Suspicious of Yáng Yúwèi's excuses, Zhu brought to classmates with him that night and stubbornly refused to leave, intentionally disrupting Yáng Yúwèi's peace by creating a ruckus all night. This infuriated Yáng Yúwèi, and he grew more and more frustrated, unable to do anything about it. After several consecutive nights, without seeing the woman's figure, they all began to consider leaving, and ceased their clamor. Suddenly, they heard a recitation of poetry from outside, and everyone listened in silence, feeling the voice to be incredibly mournful. Just as Zhu was focused on listening, one of the classmates, a martial arts student named Wang, picked up a large stone and threw it, shouting, "You're just putting on airs and not seeing guests. What kind of good poem is this? It's nothing but whining and sobbing, utterly annoying." The recitation immediately ceased. Everyone scolded Wang, and Yáng Yúwèi was even more irritated, his expression turning sour. His tone of speech grew harsh. The next day, the classmates all left. Yáng Yúwèi was left alone in an empty room, longing for the woman to return, but her presence remained elusive. 2 days later, the woman suddenly appeared, weeping and saying, "You've attracted some wicked guests. They almost scared me to death." Yáng Yúwèi repeatedly apologized. The woman hastily walked away, saying, "I told you before that our connection had come to an end. And from now on, we bid farewell forever." Yáng Yúwèi wanted to persuade her, but the woman had already vanished. After more than a month passed, the woman didn't visit once. Yáng Yúwèi missed her every day, growing so thin that his bones were visible, but he couldn't mend the situation. One night, while Yáng Yúwèi was drinking alone, the woman suddenly lifted the curtain and entered. Yáng Yúwèi joyfully exclaimed, "Have you forgiven me?" The woman, tears streaming down her face, remained silent. Yáng Yúwèi hurriedly asked what was wrong, and the woman hesitated to speak, only saying, "I left in anger, and now I've come seeking help in an urgent matter. I'm truly ashamed." Yáng Yúwèi asked repeatedly, and the woman finally said, "Some filthy ghost servant from who knows where forced me to be his concubine. I consider myself a descendant of a respectable family. How could I lower myself to the status of a lowly ghost servant? But as a weak woman, how can I resist him?" If you believe our bond is deep, akin to that of husband and wife, you won't just stand by and do nothing, will you? Yáng Yúwèi became furious, angrily wanting to kill that ghost servant. However, he was also concerned about the divide between the realm of the living and the afterlife, fearing his powerlessness. The woman said, "Tonight, go to sleep early, and I'll call you in your dreams." Thus, they reconciled once again, talking until dawn. Before leaving, the woman advised Yáng Yúwèi not to sleep during the day and to wait until night to meet, and Yáng Yúwèi agreed. The next day, in the afternoon, after having some drinks, Yáng Yúwèi, emboldened by the alcohol, got into bed, still clothed, and lay down. Suddenly, the woman appeared, handing him a decorative dagger and taking his hand, leading him outside. They arrived at a courtyard and closed the door to talk, when suddenly they heard someone throwing stones at the door. Startled, the woman exclaimed, "An enemy is here." Yáng Yúwèi opened the door and swiftly rushed out. He saw a person wearing a red hat and green clothes, with a face covered in prickly beard. Yáng Yúwèi angrily berated him, while the ghost servant glared and furiously cursed incessantly. Yáng Yúwèi became furious, wielding the dagger and charging forward. The ghost servant picked up stones and hurled them like rain. One stone hit Yáng Yúwèi's wrist, making him unable to grip the dagger anymore. In this dire moment, he saw someone in the distance, waist adorned with a bow and arrows, out hunting. Yáng Yúwèi looked closely and realized it was Wang Sheng, hurriedly shouting for help. Wang Sheng bent his bow, knocked an arrow, and quickly ran over, shooting an arrow at the ghost servant's thigh, then another, ending his life. Yáng Yúwèi thanked Wang Sheng with joy. Wang Sheng inquired about the situation, and Yáng Yúwèi explained everything. Wang Sheng was pleased that he could now redeem himself for offending the woman previously. Thus, together with Yáng Yúwèi, they entered the woman's dwelling. The woman trembled, shy and uneasy, standing far away without saying a word. Wang Sheng noticed a small knife on the table, about a foot long, adorned with gold and jade. He took out the knife and admired it. After exchanging a few words with Yáng Yúwèi and seeing the woman's embarrassed and fearful demeanor, Wang Sheng left the room, bidding farewell and departing. Yáng Yúwèi returned alone as well. After climbing over the wall, he suddenly fell to the ground. Waking up from his dream, just as the village roosters began to crow, their voices rising and falling, Yáng Yúwèi felt pain in his wrist, and when daylight came, he examined it and found his wrist swollen. By noon, Wang Sheng arrived and talked about a strange dream he had during the night. Yáng Yúwèi asked, "Didn't you dream about shooting arrows?" Wang Sheng was surprised that Yáng Yúwèi knew in advance. Yáng Yúwèi extended his wrist and explained the reason. Wang Sheng recalled the woman he saw in his dream, regretting that he hadn't truly met her. Feeling indebted to the woman, Wang Sheng asked Yáng Yúwèi to intercede on his behalf. When night fell, the woman came to express her gratitude. Yáng Yúwèi credited Wang Sheng, explaining his earnest desire to meet her. The woman said, "I cannot forget his assistance. However, he is a fierce warrior, and I am genuinely afraid." After a while she added, "He likes my dagger. That dagger was bought by my father for 100 taels of silver when he went to Guangdong. I cherished it, wrapped it in gold thread, and adorned it with pearls. My father pitied my young death and buried me with the dagger. Now I'm willing to let go of it and give it to him. Seeing that dagger will be like seeing me in person." The next day, Yáng Yúwèi conveyed the woman's sentiments to Wang Sheng, who was overjoyed. When night fell, the woman indeed came with the dagger, and said to Yáng Yúwèi, "Tell him to take care of it. This dagger isn't produced in the Central Plains." From that point on, Yáng Yúwèi's relationship with the woman was as before. After a few months passed, the woman suddenly smiled while looking at Yáng Yúwèi under the lamplight, as if wanting to say something, but her face turned red, and she remained silent. This happened many times. Yáng Yúwèi held her, and inquired, and the woman said, "For a long time, I've been blessed by your love. I've absorbed the breath of the living, immersed myself in the world's hustle and bustle, and even my bones have gained vitality. Now, I only need a bit of human essence, and I can be resurrected." Yáng Yúwèi laughed and said, "If it weren't for you refusing, how could I be stingy?" The woman said, "After we are united, You will fall seriously ill for over 20 days, but medicine can cure you. Thus, the two became even more affectionate. After a while, the woman put on clothes and said, "A little more fresh blood is needed. Can you endure the pain and cherish me?" Yáng Yúwèi took the blade, pierced his arm, and the woman lay back on the bed, letting the blood drip into her navel. She then rose and said, "I won't come again. Remember, 100 days later, if you hear a green bird singing on the treetop near my grave, dig the grave quickly." Yáng Yúwèi agreed. As she left, the woman reminded him, "Remember, don't forget. It's unacceptable whether it's early or late." With that, she departed. After more than 10 days passed, Yáng Yúwèi did indeed fall seriously ill, his belly swelling dangerously. He called for a doctor who administered medicine, resulting in the expulsion of a lot of watery and muddy substances. After another 10 days or so, he finally recovered from the illness. Calculating to the 100th day, Yáng Yúwèi instructed his family to wait at the woman's grave with tools. At dusk, 2 green birds did indeed begin to sing on the tree branches. Yáng Yúwèi joyfully said, "It's time." So, they cleared away the thorns, opened the grave, and found that while the coffin had rotted, the woman's appearance remained lifelike. Yáng Yúwèi touched her lightly and felt warmth emanating from her body. He covered her with clothes, carried her back to his home, and placed her in a warm spot. Sensing a faint breath from the woman's mouth, he fed her some soup and porridge. In the middle of the night, the woman woke up. From that point on, the woman often said to Yáng Yúwèi, having been dead for over 20 years, "It's as if I've had a dream."